Hi, and welcome to THORsday Comics. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design. And today we're going to be talking about Journey into Mystery number 86, the first appearance of Zarko the Tomorrow Man. Although I think they just call him the Tomorrow Man in here, maybe not Zarko yet. This was a very important story to me. Maybe not necessarily comic. It's a great comic and all, but just for me personally, I saw the Grant Ray Lawrence Thor cartoon, those old Marvel cartoons, where they basically took the Jack Kirby drawings and then just did minute amounts of animation to them. Moved the camera or added moving lips. It was the first time I'd ever seen any of those cartoons before, and it was this particular story, and it just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Just that whole style, sort of Saturday morning style cartoons, but with a level of graphic intensity that you just wouldn't see because they were taken from Kirby drawings. And I just loved the whole aesthetic of a mythological god, an ancient Norse god fighting these these robots that were sort of state-of-the-art, organic, high-tech, but also kind of clunky and retro at the same time. It's just a really interesting aesthetic. This is a great cover. Again, we're looking at the reprints from the recent Thor packaging. Great cover. I think those are kind of some of the most successful covers are when you sort of have a lot of grays and a lot of sort of toned down colors, and then bright colors of the superhero really pop. So great cover. And we start off in this kind of, Kirby future, kind of like a future sort of pulled from his pulp influences, but also uniquely his own. And it's almost like a new Genesis or something, especially these sort of flying vehicles that everybody's flying around. It's a utopia that, this is sort of the Silver Age. And as sort of down and dirty as these Marvel comics are compared to the DC comics, there's still sort of like a hopeful future. This is in this utopia, and beautifully designed. I mean, we've seen utopias in like the DC comics of the era, and they're kind of bland and kind of Eisenhower era, where this just feels very sci-fi. I love the design of these gliders that they ride on. What a great design for a time machine. Just lots of cool stuff. Story-wise, you have the Tomorrow Man, he's in this utopian world, and he's very uncomfortable, very much not at home there. And it's, that's a theme we'll see in other Kirby comics where, somebody is sort of dissatisfied in paradise, an outsider in paradise. I think of Orion in some of the sort of flashback stories, Tales of the Young Gods and whatnot, how, he's just not at home on New Genesis. It just feels like something's wrong there. And the Tomorrow Man is experiencing that too. The Reject in Eternals, how when he shows up in Olympia and it's this paradise, he's still sort of paranoid and looking for, hidden dangers in this sort of paradise. So we have that as the setup here. And in this future, there are no weapons. They have all kinds of high technology. They have time travel, but no weapons. Just a very enlightened society. And he wants to stir up some trouble. So he's looking into the past, and he sees the era of the atomic bomb, of the nuclear bomb. So he's going to go back in time to get that weapon so he can rule the world. In the San Diablo episode, sort of talked about, it being sort of a Cold War comic, and Thor being almost like an extension of like American foreign policy. And here, Thor has become sort of even more deputized and part of the establishment, part of the military-industrial complex. He's helping the military test out, in the year 1962, he's helping the military test experimental weapons, test missiles. And so he's, seeing if he can outrace these missiles and things. And you have almost like a General Thunderbolt Ross. If they were thinking as far into crossovers. Maybe this is Thunderbolt Ross, or maybe when Kirby drew this, he was thinking of Thunderbolt Ross and was keeping the sort of consistency of that character, and it just never made its way into the verbiage of the comic. So they're gauging the results with Thor, and now they're about to test the C bomb, the cobalt bomb, which I don't know if that's a real thing. And like cobalt seems to be a thing that pops up. I mean, I know cobalt is real. I don't know if there's a cobalt bomb, but we sort of get, cobalt as another one of those sort of popular words or popular elements used in Marvel Comics. We have the Cobalt Man, who was sort of a riff on Iron Man. But so they're testing the cobalt bomb, and they're going to test to see just how invulnerable Thor is. And Thor is a brave guy because he's willing to put his money where his mouth is and really test, how indestructible he is by standing next to a nuclear device. Hats off to him. He's super brave, super confident of his powers. I guess he's sort of, he has no doubt of those powers, and so is willing, in the name of, patriotism or civic duty, is willing to test that out, put himself in a severe spot. And it's kind of a fun little sequence. It kind of harkens back to Hulk, all the nuclear testing. Again, Cold War era is when these stories are being told. But it's a great little setup. Like, we're about to have a nuclear bomb go off, just a couple feet away from our hero. And an interloper pops in, the Tomorrow Man, who I don't think he's named Zarko yet in this story. I think he's named Zarko in his second appearance. The bomb's about to go off. He kind of sneaks in his little time machine, snags the bomb, and then gets back in his time machine, disappears just in time for Thor to throw his hammer through the disappearing time machine. You sort of compare this to the time machine that the Legion of Superheroes went around in, which was just sort of a sphere, very boring. This has a cool design, has like moving parts, a transforming element, how the hatch goes up. If anybody in the audience knows of any, if this is like a pure Kirby invention, which I think is highly likely, or if this is something he might have grabbed out of Popular Mechanics or out of like a pulp magazine. It's such a great design. If you can think of anything else that sort of harkens back to this, it certainly has sort of like a UFO look to it. And then this moment here where the hammer's going through the time machine as it fades away. Again, it's another Kirby motif. I think of the scene in New Gods #1 when Orion and his crew are escaping through the boom tube, and just as the boom tube's vanishing, Calabac throws his like club, through it, and is sort of frustrated. The test went about as bad as it could go, short of killing Thor. The nuclear device they were testing was stolen by somebody, and they have no idea who he is, where he's from, who he works for. And so, Thor needs some answers. So he goes, and we get another addition to sort of his powers that, and sort of the rules of this universe. When he taps his hammer twice, tap, tap, it creates a lightning bolt and creates a storm. And we're sort of into a very, almost like a ritualistic moment. And I think of the way that Kirby would write these stories, sort of create them visually and start with the visuals and let them unfold that way. It's a very ritualistic about it, something shamanic, something that it just kind of comes from sort of the depths of like sort of the human animal or sort of the human consciousness. It's just kind of interesting, and to sort of go into this sort of tribal kind of calling upon the old gods. It's just like, I don't know. It's just very very effective. And so he's called upon his father, Odin, Lord of the Norse gods, and he sort of shows up in this sort of godly form, this giant floating face in the heavens. The ritual was a success, and with a lot of these stories, you kind of think like, okay, boilerplate kind of stuff. It's a superhero story, so he's going to fight a futuristic guy who has robots and time machines and things. But reading this thing thematically, it's kind of a good pairing when you have this sort of ancient god who represents superstition, the old ways, the old gods, ritual and whatnot. It's kind of like a really smart idea to contrast him or put him in opposition to a character who represents science, the future, especially sort of a sort of the dark side of technology and scientific inquiry and sort of the mad scientist ultimately. It's just really effective, and this early in the series, it's a nice pairing. We haven't settled into a sort of ongoing antagonist the way Darkseid is used in the New Gods, or the way Loki is later used in this, or in the way that Magneto and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is used in the X-Men. So anyway, he asks Odin to help him find this Tomorrow Man, and so he takes a little tiny piece of the spaceship, of the time machine that was left behind, and he wraps it around his hammer, and he asks for Odin to give him like a little extra oomph to help him travel through time to find where this guy came from, and that this piece of future material kind of helps him get there. And this is another thing we see in future issues where Odin is the source of Thor's magic, the source of his powers, and Odin can take those powers away. He can cut them in half. He can augment them, but it all comes from him. The magic in the hammer, that is Odin's hammer, which gets established and clarified in later Tales of Asgard stories. But anyway, he goes through time, and it's kind of this montage of years, which is not too far off from what you'd see in a Superman comic. The thing I think of here is there's the Bugs Bunny episode where Bugs Bunny goes into the future, and he and Elmer Fudd are old men, and it has the same kind of passage of years here. Both of these things are a reference to something else, maybe like a Buck Rogers or something has that kind of thing. If anybody knows the answer, please let me know in the comments. So now he's in the future. I love the way these people are dressed in the future. It's a little bit of that era, a little bit early 60s, late 50s, fused with some futurism. Very fun. The way this woman's drawn, it's kind of like maybe in the future our brains are a little bigger, and Thor kind of creates a stir in the city, just like he did back in 1962. He kind of creates a stir when he shows up, and we see that the Tomorrow Man's plan has already worked. He is now the dictator of this future world. He used his exclusive ownership of weapons technology, of the C-bomb, to take over. And so now we have this great little future sequence, cool costuming, cool architecture, awesome little vehicles zipping around. Man, what a cool toy that would make. And there's a mysterious robed figure who is, knocking down a tree to block. Who is this robed figure? And we got, Thor in full costume running around with this robed figure. Very, very cool. I mean, you can kind of guess. You might have your guesses of who this robed figure is, but definitely like a cool little bit of suspense in here. Thor falls down into this room full of magnetic mirrors. Love the sort of fun Silver Age pseudoscience here, and he's getting whipped around by these magnetic mirrors. And the reveal that we get is that this guy this Thor that fell into the trapdoor into these magnetic mirrors, was actually like a buddy, a guy from the future who volunteered to help Thor out and dress up as Thor, while Thor was the guy disguised in the gray cloak, which you may have guessed. Now, the interesting thing, the thing I was thinking of reading this, it's been forever since I've read this, and so I kind of forgot the ins and outs of the plot, but I thought like, oh, maybe I kind of figured that the guy in the gray suit was going to be, some kind of god, maybe Balder or somebody, but I thought, yeah, okay, maybe it's Thor. And if it is Thor, that maybe these are two Thors from slightly different times. So it's almost like, one of those tangled time travel stories where, like, Thor, a little bit after this story, realizes that, there was a mysterious other Thor. And in order, like Bill and Ted or something, like, okay, make sure once the adventure's done to sort of come back in time as a guy in a cloak to kind of make to close the loop on this this sort of time travel pretzel. Zarko points another weapon that he apparently created in this future. I don't know why he couldn't have created it in the first place instead of going back to get the cobalt bomb, but still, fun logic. I'm sure you could write in with your no prize explanation, something that like maybe this is a derivative of that cobalt bomb. But some Thor's getting zapped and whacked, and now as the Tomorrow Man runs away, now he's got to deal with these robots. And in the future, the robots are, the ones who sort of do all the work in this future. Super cool. I mean, this is, I remember this sequence from the cartoon, and it's just really fun seeing him square off with these gray, odd-looking robots. Kirby's robot designs are always top-notch, always a lot of fun. Reaches into the ground, pulls out a pipe, floods the area, hoping to short-circuit the robots. It works well enough for him to sort of get out. And the conclusion of the story is coming up. We're running up. We got 2 more pages to go. He summons some lightning to mess around with the guidance systems of the Tomorrow Man's ship. The Tomorrow Man is about to drop this bomb on the city, on the Earth, to as his last little fuck you. And the missile drops out. Thor catches it. And in the destruction, the sort of crash of his spaceship, the Tomorrow Man, has amnesia. He completely forgets, who he is, what motivated him to do all this stuff in the first place, forgets that he's evil. It's, another kind of story we see in other, Marvel comics, a trope we sort of see later on in other comics. The one I'm thinking of is with the Inhumans in the Fantastic Four when Maximus the Mad is defeated, and all of a sudden he's like, "What? Who am I? What am I?" And it kind of neutralizes the villain, so we can sort of have like a happy ending and not have to worry about him for a while. And then it also, interestingly, in the case of Maximus, it's like you wonder, is this some manipulation? Is he just sort of saying that to get out of the trouble that he got himself into? And maybe the Tomorrow Man's subconscious is protecting him, from confronting like the true evil that he perpetrated and feeling any guilt or remorse or whatever. Cool sort of medical team future outfits there, sort of like the future Red Cross. And so Thor has his nuclear missile, his C bomb. He's going back to the future year of 1962, and gives the bomb back to the military-industrial complex. And here, we talked about Thunderbolt Ross a little bit earlier. This guy certainly looks a lot like Bruce Banner in, I think, issue 2 of the Hulk, when he's got kind of this like baseball cap and jumpsuit look, when he and Rick Jones are sort of building the underground prison bunker where they're going to keep the Hulk, when he hulks out to keep him from causing any harm. He's back at his doctor's office with Nurse Jane, who we haven't seen in this episode yet. And anything interesting happened while I was gone? Are you kidding, Doctor? Don't you read the papers? Thor rescues C-Bomb. No, Jane, nothing in the papers interests me. It's all too nerve-wracking. Oh, if only I could work for Thor instead of colorless Dr. Blake. I wonder if Jane will ever suspect that some of us read about the news while some of us are too busy making it. The end. So again, we get another one of those sort of Superman endings, Clark Kent endings, talking to the camera, winking at the camera, sort of the science fiction and the fun fantasy aspects and the action aspects are very original, very innovative, very interesting. This is, not quite as original, maybe not quite as interesting, but is sort of a good counterbalance and helps to ground the stories and give you sort of a starting point and an end point where it can return to. And certainly, it definitely helps to underline all the fantasy elements to have some, representation of the drab, ordinary, everyday. Thank you for joining me. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. And I'd like to remind you about Jacktober. It's a month-long celebration of The Art of Jack Kirby. It's a series of drawing prompts I have listed on my Twitter at Tom Scioli and on my Instagram at Tom_Scioli, and also at my Patreon. Just go to Patreon and search Tom Scioli. I'll see you next THORsday when we'll be talking about Journey into Mystery number 87 with the mighty Thor, Prisoner of the Reds.